Tonight, we have it. Special Counsel Jack Smith's list of evidence for the new crimes allegedly committed by Trump while president. These are the 3 federal statutes that the DOJ cites in its target letter warning Trump of another possible indictment. You're looking at the actual outline of this case. This is brand new. We're talking about conspiracy, witness tampering, and deprivation of rights in then outgoing President Trump's failed coup. 2 sources telling NBC News about DOJ listing those crimes in the target letter, which Trump himself leaked, and which has created all of this interest this week in whether he will face a second federal indictment. These new details suggest new implications about the case Jack Smith is building. And so I will just go through a few key points now and then bring in our leadoff legal expert tonight, who I can tell you is a veteran of the DOJ's criminal division and who knows Jack Smith's work. Point 1, the DOJ is building a case involving multiple people. Now, that may sound logical, that may sound intuitive if you watched the January 6 hearings and saw all the assorted people involved, but again, it's one thing to imagine it, another thing to now have hard evidence of it. And this is hard evidence because a key charge here is the conspiracy to defraud the U.S., a federal crime where 2 or more persons conspire to commit an offense or act on their plan. The DOJ may be arguing Trump worked with others on 1 or more of those plots that we've shown you that stretch out over time to try to steal the election. Pretty straightforward. Point 2 here tonight. This conspiracy charge might not relate to, say, the worst or most violent thing that happened in that period, stretching from when Trump lost through, well, January 2021. It might be the plot instead with some of the more damning evidence that it ties all the way up clearly to Trump himself. For example, there has not been yet, and it could change, but I'll always tell you what we know. There hasn't been a lot of public evidence that ties Donald Trump directly to any formal militia plans to storm the Capitol on the 6th. He showed an awareness of people going to the Capitol in a very damning way when there were reports, for example, of violence. He still wanted to go there, and we had that famous fight over allegedly whether he tangled with the Secret Service to try to go there. And that might sound bad or incriminating. But again, to be clear, to Donald Trump, who's now a federal defendant in this other espionage case and is targeted for a second indictment, there wasn't evidence that we've seen publicly that, for example, there was some advance written militia plan and that Donald Trump personally saw it. But, and this is the bad news for Trump as we get the details on the target letter, there is a lot of evidence that directly ties Trump and his aides to the fraudulent electors scheme. Now, there's a lawyer with White House experience, Norm Eisen. You may have heard of him. We've interviewed him before. He's now saying when you look at those fraudulent electoral certificates and you look at what we're learning about this target letter, it shows that, quote, Trump helmed a conspiracy to defraud the U.S. In other words, Eisen thinks that Jack Smith will use this elector evidence for that specific charge. Now, the whole elector scheme was a potentially criminal act, and it was carried out with advanced knowledge and advanced planning, premeditated, in public, with Trump aides admitting it.
Today, an alternate slate of electors in the contested states is going to vote, and we're going to send those results up to Congress.
Something that Rudy and the team have worked on. The Trump slate of electors are showing up today in the state capitals.
We fought to see the electors. The Trump campaign asked us to do that.
There has been an alternate slate of electors voted upon that Congress will decide in January.
Yes, I was part of the process to make sure there were alternate electors.
That's a lot of different examples. And you heard them saying, we're going to send this in. We're going to submit it. I want to be very clear with you. We showed you that chart, and I'm going to bring it back in a minute. But the chart that we showed you makes the point that at the very beginning in November, you could argue that was legal. After those electoral college states met and certified, it was very clearly fraudulent. So you have them admitting in public, past the point of fraudulence, hey, we're going to submit fraud. We're going to submit it to the government. And saying out loud, we're going to try to use that to stop the transition to President-elect Biden. And that brings me to point 3 tonight. The DOJ has not yet charged any Trump officials for the attempted coup, including Donald Trump himself. But tonight is the first time that this DOJ target letter is being reinforced by a local criminal case against what I showed you, those red arrows, the instruments and assistance of one of the coup plots, because local prosecutors have separately charged 16 of those false or fraudulent electors over their efforts in Michigan. Now, there are other pieces, as I showed you here, of the target letter. We're going to start with conspiracy because we're going to go through this point by point. And I'm joined now, as mentioned, by Leslie Caldwell, former head of the DOJ's criminal division. She oversaw Jack Smith there. And when he was selected by Merrick Garland, she also endorsed him as fit to play the role of special counsel. Welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great to have you. I mentioned that you actually know this stuff inside and out. And the conspiracy charge, in general, we know, is we showed it on the screen, what a conspiracy is. And here we're looking at a conspiracy to defraud the U.S. as one of the statutes cited that Trump is now on notice as target of the probe. Could you walk us through that?
Sure. So I think, and again, I should caveat everything I'm about to say for this entire segment with, I don't know what the evidence is, and I think we're going to find out a lot more once the evidence is revealed in any indictment, just as we did with the document indictment, which revealed a lot of things that we didn't know before. But on the conspiracy charge, it would be it could be any different, various types of conspiracies. The statute that is referenced is the general conspiracy statute, and conspiracy to defraud the United States is one option under that statute. Here it would be potentially conspiracy to stop the certification of the election, conspiracy to influence Pence. I mean, I think your chart reflected it pretty accurately, Ari. It could be conspiracy to interfere with the results in various states and thereby interfere in the overall federal presidential election. So we'll have to see what kind of evidence Jack Smith's team has put together before we can figure out exactly what the
Would you
theory
expect
is.
Smith to have other indictments for co-conspirators, or if they're cooperating, they might be unindicted?
So I don't know is the short answer. There doesn't have to be a co-conspirator named in a conspiracy charge. It can point to unindicted co-conspirators, and generally the way it would be framed is others known to the grand jury would be other conspirators. But they can also be named, and they can be named as defendants. And I don't know how that will play out. And I don't know whether Jack Smith is going to take on, I mean, there are obviously a lot of different lawyers and different advisors and different aides to Trump who were probably involved in some fashion in various aspects of this. And I don't know what the evidence is on all that right now. So I think it could still go either way.
Understood. Let's turn, as we go through it, to that second statute, obstructing official proceeding, or technically tampering, where you have whoever corruptly obstructs, influences, or impedes an official proceeding or attempts to do so. Do you see this as a straight line to basically what we saw leading up to the 6th, summoning the people, holding the rally, and then in very overt ways having a lot of people try to delay the certification, which they did briefly do?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a mix of things. I think there will be some evidence of events that happened on the 6th, including Trump summoning people to Washington, exhorting the crowd, directing them, exhorting them to go to the Capitol. And I think the obstruction would be to obstruct the certification of the election, and possibly more broadly to obstruct the orderly reporting of the election, obstruct Biden's ability to assume his role as president. So we'll just have to see, again, how far Jack Smith's investigation has ranged and where he's landed based on the evidence.
Yeah, really interesting. Viewers will be able to hear your prosecutorial training, because you're sticking very much within the four corners, which we appreciate, because that's how this works. And the third one is, I understand from our reporting, one that, again, we don't have all the evidence yet, but you think might not be as strong. Now, we're talking about an open espionage case. We're talking about local cases. We're talking about now here 3 federal statutes. But I definitely was interested in why you might think the other case might, at least the other statute, might be less strong. This is the deprivation of rights claim, which is at least less common. In cases we've covered, and our viewers will remember this, you hear about this sometimes being used as a claim against an individual, a government official, but in that case, usually an individual police officer. For example, George Floyd's murder was one of the cases where we saw this charge used. And it says, whoever under color of law, again, so that tells you they're a government official, subjects a person to the deprivation of any rights protected by the Constitution. There you have the deprivation of Floyd's civil rights regarding the restraint and the mistreatment of him as an individual. Now, legal experts have told us this would be unusual, and we've also seen it used in cases involving racial animus, although that's not necessarily required. So I wanted to get your views on this. On the one hand, color of law, it gives you the precedent of being able to tell a jury, yeah, this is the fact that you have a gun as an officer or you have your finger on the button as commander-in-chief does not mean that you can never commit any crime in office unless you use the Nixon's false lying standard. He said, oh, if you do it, the president does, it's not a crime, and that's actually been rejected. So you can see how it would be attractive for prosecutors in certain cases to specifically use laws that deal with misconduct by officials. And the president is not above the law either, certainly, especially not out of office. On the other hand, some people don't view this as a standard statute that would be used in the context of, say, the Congress meeting. Walk us through your thoughts on it.
So I think I agree with everything you just said. I think that depending on the evidence, it may not be a weaker charge. It's a little bit more complicated charge. So I think that if the evidence is there could be a theory that a public official, the president, attempted to impair the rights of one or more individuals based on under the Constitution or the laws of the United States.